You know, this is one of those topics that's kind of uncomfortable to talk about, because the moment you bring it up, there's a part of you that wonders, am I doing this right now? And that's actually the point. I want to talk about the spiritual ego, not as a concept, not as something other people have, but as something that almost everyone who walks a spiritual path runs into at some point, including me, probably including you. Because the ego doesn't disappear just because you start meditating or praying or having insights. It doesn't die when you awaken. It adapts. It gets smarter. It learns new language. And spirituality gives it really good material to work with. When most people hear the word ego, they think of arrogance, loudness, narcissism. But the spiritual ego is quieter than that. It doesn't say, I'm better than you. It says, I see things you don't see. I've moved past that. I'm more aware now. And the tricky part is, sometimes that's based on something real, that you have changed, you have grown, you have seen things differently. But the problem starts when the mind turns that growth into an identity. When an experience becomes, this means something about who I am. I've noticed that the spiritual ego often shows up right after genuine insight. You have a moment of stillness, a moment where those thoughts drop away, the moment of deep peace or clarity, and then later, maybe minutes later, maybe days later, the mind comes in and says, okay, so what does this say about me? And that is where the trouble starts. Because now there's something to protect, something to defend, something to maintain. I'm awakened. I'm conscious. I'm not like I used to be. And suddenly, awakening becomes something you have instead of something that happened. Did you catch that? Let me say that again. Awakening becomes something you have instead of something that happened. So I need you to do a favor for me. YouTube is extremely fickle. If you could click on the like button below, or even put some kind of comment below that you like this video. This tells that YouTube algorithm to show this to more people, which really helps the channel and helps me to make more videos. So, one of the clearest signs of the spiritual ego, at least in my experience, is impatience. Impatience with people, with systems, with emotions, with the messiness of being human. You start thinking things like, how do they not see this? Why are people stuck in this? I thought I was past feeling this way. And very quietly, without meaning to, you start creating distance between you and them, between the awakened and the unawakened, between the conscious and the unconscious. That separation is ego. Another big one is emotional avoidance. And this is huge. The spiritual ego loves to label emotions. Anger becomes low vibration. Sadness becomes unhealed trauma. Fear becomes lack of faith. And instead of actually feeling those things, we try to transcend them. But here's the thing. Avoiding emotion isn't awakening. It's just avoidance with spiritual language. Real awareness doesn't reject anger. It doesn't shame grief. It doesn't rush pain toward enlightenment. It allows them to be there. And I think one of the most seductive traps is the idea that you've killed ego. Because if you say, I don't have an ego anymore, there's still something talking. Awakening isn't the absence of ego. It's the absence of identification with it. The ego still shows up. It still reacts. It still wants approval, certainty, and safety. The difference is, you see it, and you don't believe everything it says. Something else that is important to say, the ego isn't evil. It's not the enemy. It's just afraid. Afraid of uncertainty. Afraid of not knowing. Afraid of disappearing. And spirituality can feel like safety to the ego. Answers, structure, meaning. So of course, it clings to it. What real spiritual maturity looks like, at least from where I'm standing, isn't perfection. It's humility. It's the ability to say, oh, there it is again. Not with judgment, not with shame, just honesty. It's being willing to be wrong, willing to feel things you thought were the past, willing to listen more than you speak. And honestly, the more real the path gets, the less impressive it looks. It's quieter, more ordinary, more human. And maybe that's the paradox. The deeper you go, the less special you feel. Not because you're diminished, but because you're no longer separate. So if you notice the spiritual ego in yourself, that's not failure. That's awareness. And awareness, not purity, not perfection, not enlightenment, it's what actually opens the door. Here are 3 grounded, practical ways to become aware of spiritual ego. Not to fight it, but to notice it in real time. These aren't techniques to get rid of anything. They're ways to stay honest. So the first one is, notice where you feel superior or impatient. This is one of the clearest entry points. Anytime you catch yourself thinking, they just don't get it. I'm past this. Why are people still stuck here? Pause. Not in judgment of the thought, but to feel what's underneath it. Ask yourself quietly, what am I protecting right now? What identity feels threatened? Spiritual ego often shows up as subtle impatience, not arrogance. Awareness begins the moment you see the impatience without justifying it. So the second way is to watch how you relate to difficult emotions. Pay attention to what you do when anger, sadness, fear, or jealousy arise. Do you try to transcend the feeling? Label it as a low vibration or unhealed. Rush toward insight instead of staying with the emotion. If so, that's a signal. The spiritual ego often avoids emotions by spiritualizing them. True awareness doesn't bypass feelings, it includes them. A simple practice. When emotion arises, say internally, this too belongs. So the third one, listen for defensiveness around your spiritual identity. This one is subtle, but powerful. Notice what happens when your beliefs are questioned. Someone disagrees with your perspective. A teacher, book, or idea challenges your view. If you feel tightened, irritated, or the urge to correct, pause. Defensiveness doesn't mean you're wrong. It means something inside of you is being identified with. Ask, who is being defended right now? Can I stay open instead of being right? Awareness grows that moment you stop needing to protect being awake. Seeing the spiritual ego isn't a failure of the path. It's a sign you're actually walking it. The ego softens not through attack or elimination, but through gentle, honest seeing again and again. If you're curious about what real awakening is, I suggest you watch this video. It will give you true insight on what awakening is.